and arrest and interact with are just plain old mentally ill. And as I understand it, a generation or two ago, we put people in mental institutions and did that sort of thing. And I think without the numbers, there's just tons and tons of jail space for people who are seriously mentally ill. Maybe that's this guy. And by the way, when I say that, I don't mean like, hey, it's cool to go steal stuff and take a baseball bat and break your ex-wife's, windows out of her car or whatever like that. I'm not at all excusing it, but I just think that if we have X amount of space for actual criminals, 2/3 of that, making that up, is being filled with mentally ill people. We ought to have X amount of space for criminals and Y amount of space for the mentally ill. And so we don't have to keep dealing with this. And I'm not a bleeding heart liberal. I think it's better for the mentally ill to be in a place where they're not just going to be in a violent place like jail with other criminals. So we just lost our way. 60s and 70s, as I understand it, is when they deinstitutionalized people and let all these folks out. And they thought they were being so compassionate. A good chunk of the homeless, are mentally ill. So this isn't the mentally ill podcast, it's This Week in Guns, but that's an observation I've had.
I completely 100% agree. And we've talked about it on this show and other shows before, the lack of institutions, and it's caused a lot of problems with crime and homelessness and all these other things, that we no longer have a place for people to go or to be when they are suffering from serious mental illness. So yeah, I could not agree more. Next story comes to us from Parkland, Florida. Broward County Sheriff being suspended for his failure at Parkland is what the headline says, but I'm not sure it's that cut and dry. The new governor was just sworn into Florida, and then Scott Israel told his union, members of his union, that it looks like he's going to be suspended, removed from service. You may remember Parkland. You probably heard about it in the news, something like that. And there's a lot of leadership failures. Is he responsible for that day directly with his own hand? No, but in my opinion, the leader has to fall on the sword sometimes, and he had a culture that didn't do their jobs. And I think that he is a problem. That's my personal opinion. I don't know how true that is, but just on the information that I've read, Glenn, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. He's a leader. He needs to take the fall. We all know the dozens of things that just went terribly wrong at Parkland. I don't mean, just on the day of the shooting. I mean, all the things that led up with it. The thing that comes to everybody's mind is the 39 police calls to this bad guy's house. And of course, I don't know about you, I try not to say the name of these dirtbags that do this kind of stuff because I don't want them to get any glory whatsoever. So we'll just call them dirtbag. Mm-hmm. And all kinds of failures, some school construction failures. There's the school resource officer who apparently was cowering behind his car. The one guy with a gun, the phrase, active shootings are always ended when a second gun comes on the scene. Well, there was a second gun on the scene, and it happened to be cowering behind a car, if all that stuff is true. Yeah. There's a failure. And the way that the thing that bugs me the most about that sheriff is that one of the first, responses was political guns, right? He's a big Hillary Clinton supporter, big Democrat, Broward County, a lot of Democrats in Broward County. And you're right, the culture, you hit it on the head. A leader can set a terrible example and allow bad cultures to just kind of go and go and go. And then there's something like this. So yeah, he probably should take the fall, but there's probably plenty of blame to go around.
Yeah, definitely. Cheryl, Danny?
Well, we just yesterday had the incredible honor of interviewing Andrew Pollock, the dad of Meadow Pollock, and he's been so vocal with his hashtag #FixIt, right? So he's about school security. He doesn't want to get in the weeds talking about guns and gun rights and that sort of thing. He's like, let's just do what we can do to save kids. And so one of the things that he talked about so much on our show was that the things that led up to this shooting were things that the sheriff and the school board, and he cites some Obama leniency rules or policies, he called them, that led up to something like this. Because just like our previous story we were talking about, when people are not held accountable, when they commit a little crime, right? And then the next crime, they're not held accountable. And then they escalate and escalate and escalate until they finally do something that is beyond the pale. And all of us stand around shocked and don't know, where did that come from? And so when he was talking, Andrew was talking about the school superintendent, that one of the things he was so proud of is that when he came on, suddenly all this school-related crime plummeted, dropped dramatically. And it wasn't that. It was that they stopped reporting it. They stopped doing anything about it. They stopped talking about it. And he, with a straight face, looked at the public and said, hey, what I'm doing here is working. And in the meantime, this person, this murderer, was escalating and escalating and escalating to the point that he ends up, murdering and destroying so many lives. And so just really quickly before Danny jumps in here, I did see on Andrew Pollack's Facebook page today that there is a new sheriff in town, that Gregory Toney is now the sheriff of Broward County. Thank you to Governor Ron DeSantis for bringing accountability to Broward. #fix it.
Very nice.
Right. That killer, he was caught with ammunition before, and they didn't report it. And he was not
on
even,
school grounds, which is bad right there.
And he wasn't even allowed to have a backpack at school because they were afraid he was going to bring something. So how ridiculous is it that you don't report the crime?
Yeah, I can't even. Yeah, it's completely annoying, and the whole situation is good. But I personally really do believe that the previous sheriff was a huge problem, just in that whole entire culture that lived there. And Glenn said it. The first thing he did was talk about something political after this, and he started covering his butt probably before the shooter was even stopped. So.
Yeah, point fingers somewhere else. That's exactly the opposite of leadership.
Yeah, exactly. Washington gun dealer legally defies new law barring 18 to 20-year-old buyers from purchasing guns. Now, Glenn, this comes from your backyard here, so I would love to hear your thoughts on this, and if you don't mind summarizing it, I'd appreciate that as well.
You bet. And I'll start off with some very cogent and complicated legal analysis, and that is Neener, Neener, Neener. And that's what we say to the anti-gun people who wrote this initiative. So Washington, which by the way, used to be pretty cool when it came to gun rights. And like a year or two ago, things started going south. There was this dumb initiative about, no private sales, which we may talk about in a different context. And that kind of got the ball rolling. There have been a lot of, Democrats and socialists really that have moved into the Seattle area for all the tech jobs. And they've really kind of messed up the demographics here. But anyway, or the voting here. So this year, or in November, there was a terrible, so-called reasonable gun control initiative on the ballot, Initiative 1639. One of the things it did was, speaking of Parkland, it said that you had to be 21, not 18, to own, quote, semi-automatic assault rifles. And a lot of people, by the way, that voted for this initiative have since at least told me personally, like, I didn't know it was in it. I thought it was just the 18-year thing. It was many, many other things. So here's the funny part. It was January 1st that it goes into effect. So you're not supposed to sell, long guns or semi-automatic rifles or whatever to anyone under 21. So Linwood Guns, a gun store that I know of actually, sold firearms and is selling firearms to people under 21. How are they getting away with it? This is the beauty. This is the Neener part. Well, it turns out that the definition of what a semi-automatic assault rifle is that then attaches to this ban on sales if you're under 21, it's not going to be defined until July 1st. So from now to July 1st, there's no definition of what a semi-automatic rifle is. And so you can't be thrown in jail or fined or whatever for selling something the government hasn't defined yet. That would be void for vagueness. So it must have looked really easy to Bloomberg and whatever lawyers he hired, right? We'll just do an initiative in Washington. How hard can it be? They didn't connect all the dots. They didn't think this through about the effective date, which I find hilarious. So, hey, if you're under 21 in Washington State, go buy guns while you can.
Yeah. What was the name of the place again? I definitely want to make sure they get
Yeah, Linwood Guns.
Yes, Linwood Gun and Ammunition. So good for them. I think that's great. Cheryl, Danny, what do you guys think?
Well, I absolutely applaud them for not only understanding and knowing that this is still okay for them to do, and you know the whole Neener is so appropriate here. But I think that's part of the problem, is that so many people don't know. You know, just like Glenn was saying, people that he knows were like, "Oh, I didn't know that that's what was in it." And whenever I hear people saying, you know, there's this big percentage that they like to throw out in the media that of people that Americans believe that we need tougher gun laws. And I was thinking, tougher than what? You tell me what the laws are, because I guarantee you a huge portion of those people have zero idea what the laws are. So tougher than what?
Cheryl, just pass the bill. We'll read it later.
Oh my gosh. Don't make me hurt you on a Friday night.
It's funny because, you know, Washington, I remember when California was the place to buy guns. We used to drive over to the Great Western Show in California, and if I didn't get a truckload of guns when I came back, it was disappointing. Mm-hmm. They were the hub. That was the place where you bought the unusual military, the cool stuff. What happened so quick?
There was even manufacturers there.
Oh, yeah.
Huge gun shows, like you said.
And get this. Just yesterday, I bought a Class 3 auto burglar in the box. And it was addressed to the mayor of Los Angeles. Back in the day. You know,
Auto burglar.
It was a sawed-off shotgun.
Okay.
And
that's the name of a gun?
I mean, a mayor.
That is ill-advised. Right. I'm just going to say, that is an ill-advised name. But
I like it.
But the fact that a mayor of Los Angeles bought that gun, and where have all those mayors gone?
I don't know. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Linwood Gun and Ammunition. Congrats to those guys. Love them. Next story: Dr. sues FBI and ATF for denial of a gun purchase over medical marijuana use. I mean, it's not even the first time that this has happened. It's the first time, I guess, maybe it's happened with a doctor. So he has a medical marijuana card. It is to treat PTSD, which is pretty commonly used for. Went in to buy a gun. And I'm a little bit unclear on how this went, but it says that the clerk at the gun store asked him some questions, which indicates that maybe he was filling out the 4473. But anyway, 11E, are you an unlawful user or addicted to marijuana or any other narcotic? He said yes, and the guy refused to sell him the gun, and now it's going to be going to court, and it looks like there's some politicians that are interested in this as well. And I think I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts. Cheryl, Danny, why don't you guys start this one off for us?
I'll start this one. The federal law says you can't use marijuana. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if federal law says you can't use marijuana, and you want to come in and buy a gun, and the form says that you can't, they need to change that, because it's very hard on us. I mean, we've had people that accidentally dropped their medical card while they were filling out a 4473, which to me is like set up or whatever. Mm-hmm. But pass a law to get it off the federal books so that people that are using marijuana legit can buy a gun. Because, I mean, I use an inhaler. It's a drug, okay? So it's lawful for me to use that because I get a prescription. So if marijuana is prescribed to somebody, right, why wouldn't that be legal too?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
No. I agree.
So yes, there's two layers to it, really. If they would take the marijuana off of the schedule of drug class that it's on, mm-hmm. that would solve the problem right there, right? Because you're filling out federal paperwork, you're, using a federally controlled substance. Those two things can't work together. Yeah. Congressman Thomas Massie out of Kentucky, we actually interviewed him yesterday too. This is so interesting. Two of our guests have hit hot buttons for us tonight. He had suggested, I think he actually put a bill out there, suggested just taking the question off of the 4473 mm-hmm. about marijuana. Because if the fear is that someone is going to not be in their full capacity when they're around firearms, Well, you can own every kind of liquor there is. You can drink every kind of liquor there is. Inside of your home, you can have liquor that you're drinking and guns, right? If you go out in a bar, then you can't have all those things together. But there's no logic to the argument that, well, if you have guns or you have any access to guns, then access to marijuana is then somehow, you know, like a crazy idea that we haven't ever seen any comparative examples of in society.
And I mean, they just changed the form in the last year to actually even go further on marijuana, to add the warning: the use or possession of marijuana remains unlawful under federal law, regardless of whether it's been legalized or decriminalized for medical or recreational purposes in the state where you reside. So, I mean, they clearly changed it. And you're right, he did draft legislation to just remove that question completely. Glenn, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, you and I live in states where marijuana is 100% legal as a matter of state law, Colorado and Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure it's true in Colorado too, but in Washington state, you know, you can't throw a dead cat and not hit a marijuana store, it seems like. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, it's like a somewhat common Christmas gift even, right? And so a lot of people in Washington state, not me, by the way, because, I mean, I don't have huge things against it, really. I just choose not to do it. I mean, I don't need distractions in my life. And so anyway, a lot of people are probably users of marijuana and they think it's legal under state law. So I get the legal thing that's out there, which is under federal law, it's illegal. And I nod my head and I say, yeah. But here's my big question. And that is, you know, you're watching TV and there are all those ads for prescription drugs, like, you know, do you have like itchy skin? Take this. And then they give you all the warning and the side effects: explosive diarrhea, bleeding out your ears, you know, suicidal thoughts, right? That's what I'm getting at. Extreme depression, all these other things. And I don't know how often that really happens, but I know this: there are probably a lot of other medications, and I'm going to count marijuana as a medication for this, that produce really bad side effects. And I notice, you know, ATF doesn't seem to worry about those. Now, it'd be too hard, I guess. You know, they can't have like 7,000 different drugs listed on a thing, and are you using these? But I don't think the only people who are on a medication of some kind who probably shouldn't have guns are just people who smoke marijuana. Medical side too, there are a ton of people that have the medical marijuana cards. They're not really needed anymore. But anyway, there are a lot of people affected by this, more than you would think. And so I don't know, I can kind of see it. I really don't want people who are high all the time buying guns. But then again, I catch myself and I say, hey, when we're talking about restricting gun ownership, we have to be really, really sure that it makes sense. So I'm kind of, this is rare for me. I'm undecided, but I note that those prescription drugs, you know, have all kinds of weird side effects.
You know, it's really hard with the marijuana thing. I don't use marijuana. I've never used it. I'm a pro-rights guy. So how do I stand there and say, you can't have marijuana, but you leave our guns alone, right?
Like, you either are for freedom or you're not. So.
And I'll tell you, removing it from the Schedule I, it would empty out those jails a little bit, like Glenn said, once those cases start coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm like Dan. I don't have a horse in that race. I've never used it, you know, so I don't care specifically about that. But I just think, you know, if I'm an adult and I'm allowed to make decisions for my life and my body, this thing grows out of the ground. Why are people's lives being destroyed and liberty being restricted over that? But we can distill all kinds of different things and turn it into liquor, and we know that there are liquor changes people's behaviors, and that's still okay, and it's not prescribed. I don't think anybody's prescribing liquor. So
I'm with you. And, you know, the warning label on marijuana would be just, you know, caution, may want Cool Ranch Doritos. So
yeah.
I think that's a not bad side effect. In my opinion. So I hope that this goes somewhere, and, you know, it's going to happen. That's my thoughts on this. Like, this is going to happen. It's federally going to change, and that's going to lead to some big changes. But, you know, I know everyone's going to push back. I voted to legalize it here. I don't use it, but I also think that our jails are full of people that you know, were doing victimless crimes especially stuff that involved marijuana, and I'm not down with it. Now, I will say here in Colorado, from what I've been able to garner, and this is all like anecdotal, is that we've had a pretty big influx of homeless population around the dispensaries and things like that. So it's definitely not been great, but I would vote for it over and over and over again, because like you guys, I'm all about, freedom and decriminalizing silly stuff.
Right. And the deal is, like, if a person walks in my store and he smells like alcohol and he's a little weird, I'm not going to sell him a gun. I'm going to tell him to come back. Same with the marijuana. If they smell like marijuana, I'm just, hey, look, we can't sell you a gun, and move on. So if you smoke marijuana, if they do legalize it and you smoke it and you do a crime with a gun, or you have an accident with a gun, then you're fully responsible for that, just as if you would with alcohol. But we don't need that rule. We don't need to say you can't buy a gun if you have a marijuana card.
Yep, I agree. Coming to us from Boulder, Colorado, only 342 weapons have been certified in mass non-compliance to Boulder weapons ban. So basically what they passed a thing that said, if you have, I'm using air quotes and sarcasm with all due intent, assault rifles, that you have to come in and not register them, but get a certificate for them. They don't track the certificates, or so they say. They just keep a written tally of how many people come in and do it, but they give you a certificate. So if that you're caught with air quotes and sarcasm, an assault rifle, that you have to present the certificate. Otherwise you face penalties and things like that. So it is a university town. It has a population of 107,000 people. And I know friends that I'm pretty sure have more than 342 AR-15s and semi-automatic rifles. So good civil disobedience is a great thing, in my opinion. Glenn, how do you feel about this?
Well, it's interesting that this is the sort of the lowest, weakest form of registration. I still don't approve of it or think it's a good idea. Merely getting a certificate, probably like one of those participation trophy things that all the millennials get. But anyway, so there's the weakest form of registration, and in Boulder, Colorado, you can only get 342 people to comply with it, because I think, as much as we make fun of hippies and all of that other stuff, a lot of them, kind of have it down. I mean, there are left libertarians, those kind of dope smoking folks that still don't trust the government and still believe in a lot of freedoms. And, I love that. That's cool. I mean, we may vote for different people and eat different food and listen to different music. But hey, I mean, if you're pro freedom and you're pro guns, right on. This just, I think, is the rock bottom test for gun registration. If you can't even get 340 people in a liberal town, super liberal town like Boulder, out of 107,000 to even get their little certificate, then this can't work anywhere. You could not construct an easier test to succeed at than this, and they failed miserably. So, good on you, Boulder hippies.
I'm totally down. It's just a few hours north of me, and I know they've actually got a big gun culture up there. We have listeners that come down to visit the studio during range days and things like that. And yeah, the big gun culture up there, which is surprising for all the reasons Glenn said. Now, Cheryl and Danny, thoughts here?
Yeah, you know what? Let's save the officials some money. Instead of making an 8x11 certificate, just give everybody a gold star, right? A little gold star. And I really think what my idea of what they're doing, I just heard about this and what came to my head, this is a test to see if they can get away with a registration. Okay? Yeah. If they don't get any resistance from this, they're going to go to the next step. They don't want to revolt. They want to do it smooth and easy. So that's what I think.
Absolutely. And what I would add to that is, it has got to be so hard to be a Democrat right now if you value the Second Amendment and your rights to self-defense and your gun rights, because like the whole time they're saying, yay, go team, we're winning, they are losing or threatening to lose an entire hunk out of our Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment. Because in the last Congress, there was the HR 5087, the assault weapons ban bill, that pretty much listed by item, gun by gun, the ones that they were going to ban. And it was pretty much anything semi-auto rifle, not just rifles, pistols, and not even just pistols, shotguns. were on this ban. And, you know, the people that I talk to that are Democrat, that are liberal, were like, oh, it's not going to go anywhere. And I said, well, okay, it's not going to go anywhere right now, because at that time, the GOP still had the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Well, now the Democrats have the House. What if in 2 years they have the Senate and the presidency? Well, they take that little bill off, they blow the top layer of dust off, reintroduce it, and there's no stopgap. There's nothing to keep it from moving forward.
How many people signed that?
176 elected officials put their name to that abomination against our rights. And so now that we're in the 116th Congress, I think we are now, that just yesterday, I think, is when a new one was put out. And it was, again, the usual suspects, Blumenthal and the lady from California. Everybody knows her name, and it just
Feinstein.
Thank you. And I haven't read it yet, but they're calling that a re-up of the 2017. So I don't know why they're not referencing the 2018. But again, sometimes they do these things, the politicians do these things because it messages their base, but it's safe because they know it can't go anywhere, because they know that the Senate and the president are not going to sign this thing. But there are some Republicans that have signed on to the one that was introduced yesterday.
Yeah.
So we're not safe ever.
No.
It's like termites constantly trying to eat away at our rights.
Unless you're in a Huntsville, Alabama nightclub where a security officer named Toya stops a man shooting an AK-47, AK-74 or whatever outside of this club. So this guy gets kicked out, goes out in the parking lot. He's mad about it. He gets an AK-47. He starts firing it indiscriminately as he walks towards the front door of the club. He's shooting it into cars, doing a lot of different things. And this security officer, she's just pretty kind of unassuming girl. She stalks him around a car. She shoots him, puts him down, then decides that she's going to run back into the club, get her trauma kit and tourniquet, and come out to treat him. By the time she gets out, he's already hopped into an unidentified car and left. And then in the news article, she speaks very clearly and lucidly about what she did, why she did it. And then, she said, I went in to get my tourniquet because anyone who carries a firearm should have them and know how to use them. I think she's pretty amazing. Glenn, did you hear about this one?
Yeah, I did. And I just thought, I mean, how many stereotypes are broken here? Like, oh, women, aren't tough. Women can't shoot people and all this other stuff. She's amazing. And I love the part about having a trauma kit if you're going to have a gun. I don't personally live by that rule. I mean, I have a trauma kit in the truck, so it's not on me at all times. But heck yeah. And once again, you've got an active shooter, and the reason that active shooting stopped was when a second firearm showed up. And I mean, this security guard, and from the pictures in the newspaper, she seems, pretty young. Mm-hmm. She's way more brave and competent and clear thinking than the school resource officer we were talking about earlier in Parkland. Yeah. So good on you. I mean, I would, I'll probably never be in Huntsville, Alabama, and I don't really go to clubs, but I appreciate this. This is cool. And you know what? Here's something else that's cool. People will hear about this club and they'll realize it's a safe place to be because she's there, and maybe they'll have an uptick in business. So that's good too. So mm-hmm. I think it's wonderful. What a great story. And you know what? I bet it's not getting a ton of national coverage. I mean, it's in an Alabama TV station's website. Okay, cool. Yeah. But I mean, we're not hearing about this all over the place, but if somebody, does something stupid, then we hear about that for days and days. So yeah, this is a great story. There's good news out there on occasion.
Yeah, I was super pleased. Danny and Cheryl, what do you guys think of her?
I think she's amazing. I did see the clip, and I was so impressed with her poise. Even the way she spoke, you can tell she's highly trained. And I think that is so important and so vital when we are trying to protect our Second Amendment rights, that we are doing everything we can to be part of the solution, so that we aren't, we have to be more polite than everyone else. We have to be more aware than everyone else. We have to be more trained than everyone else, because there's a responsibility involved in carrying a firearm. Just like she said about having the trauma kit.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was brilliant. That was beautiful. And it paints all of us gun owners in such a great light that, you know, not only are we ready to protect lives by using force if we have to, but we're ready to save lives if the need presents itself as well.
What I thought of, I always keep $60 in my wallet. If I shoot an active shooter, I'll go down and buy a kit for him and bring it back, and hopefully everything. Just joking, guys. I mean, shooter, come on.
You could order it on Amazon, and maybe it comes in 2 or 3 days. Maybe you could do that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I'll get one.
Oh man,
I'm in trouble now. I know that, but
nope, it's good. It's good. I'm actually happy to say that I did track her down, and I booked her on my other show, We Like Shooting. She'll be on our next episode, so I'm really looking forward to talking to her.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she's pretty great so far, and yeah, I think we need people who don't fit the normal stereotypes to kind of break out of that. I think it's fantastic. And my favorite quote in the entire article is the very last line. She said, "Thankfully, he's still alive today. One day, he's going to have the opportunity to make better choices."
Yes.
wow.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
she's awesome.
She is. I love her. Never met her, but I love her.
Yep, agreed. Moving on, House Dems plan to introduce bill to criminalize private gun sales. I think, Cheryl, you just alluded to this, that 5 Republicans also put their name on it. This comes to us from Breitbart, and yeah, they want universal background checks. And I can say, coming from Colorado, where universal background checks have existed, and I think only 2 people have been charged with them. They were both add-on charges, just to further put charges on them so that they couldn't get rid of all of them or plea bargain their way out of all of them. Both were dropped in Colorado. So really, this universal background check that has inconvenienced law-abiding gun owners, as most of these things do, but a nationwide one where you can't even gift your child a firearm or anything like that. Glenn, have you heard of this? What do you think?
Yeah, and it's the same thing that we have in Washington State that I was mentioning earlier. And it's just been a colossal pain. It's dumb. It doesn't do anything. I note that quite a few counties in Washington State, you got Seattle and the metro area, and then everywhere outside of there are 39 counties. There are probably 4 that are really liberal. And in those other 35 counties, including the county I live in, the sheriff has said, "I'm not enforcing that law." The local prosecutor has said, "I'm not prosecuting that law." And that's pretty universal. So it's really just a liberal zone only law. The problem is that, it could be you could be prosecuted for it if, I don't know, you get a new sheriff or something like that. It's just, it's not doing anything. You hit the nail on the head. It's an add-on charge after somebody has already done some other stuff. Feel good nonsense. Pretty good example of that. So I don't have much of an opinion on it because it's kind of a nothing thing other than an annoyance and a infringement on liberty.
Yeah, and we'll do exactly what it's done in these states. A national one will do nothing for anything. Danny, Cheryl?
Well, in Arizona, we don't have any of those type of laws. And what problems do we have? Is there a rampant people buying guns illegally? No, it's there's no need for that law. It's not going to solve anything. And you're right, it is a tack on. And they'll say, well, we can't get them for this, but you know what? We can do this and we can do that. So somebody will give a gun to a relative. They might get pulled over. They see the gun. Where'd you get it? My brother gave it to me. And now they've got something on the guy. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's just it's not going to do any good. It's another stupid thing that just further takes away our ability to, exercise our freedoms. And I think about stuff. I always try to put myself in the place of, does it make a difference? Will it do any good? And I can't conceptualize any way where it does, where it solves a problem, stops a problem. And then I always apply the test. Would this have stopped any of the other things that have happened or any of the mass killings that have happened in our country in the last few years? And no, it doesn't. I don't see that it would have. The people who did actually buy the guns legally got them legally and use them for terrible things. It doesn't fix the problems that have happened. It doesn't fix any future problems. So it's just feel good nonsense for people to feel like they're doing something. And when, as they avoid actually doing anything.
Why don't we look at a state like Arizona and use that as an example? Why can't that be applied in Washington or Texas or, all these other states or anywhere.
Yeah, because guns are scary.
Yeah.
Well, they were designed to be scary, but only to bad guys.
Yeah. I don't understand it. Moving on to the next story, it's just about corporate activism, banks being blamed for financing mass killings. This comes to us from the New York Times, so you can see how that's going to go just right off the bat. But they talk about some of the mass killings that have happened over the last years and how they had huge purchases on their credit cards, and something that could clearly be tracked and audited, just like they track fraud right now. And people are saying, well, if they don't do something about this, and credit card companies, to their credit so far, pun intended, they've kind of said, we're not here to be Big Brother or anything like that. And clearly when they monitor for fraud and tag fraud and then call you and tell you why your debit card didn't work while you're out on a date or something like that, that is for them because they lose money on those things. For this, there's no real incentive for them to do so. So I don't really see them doing it, but I think that we'll see some companies actually get involved with corporate activism. And that it worries me. I think since there's not really a whole lot of money on the line for them, it's probably not a huge priority, but just the fact that it's kind of being discussed and being tracked and things like that worries me. Glenn?
Yeah, this is a big concern to me because, and I'll try to keep my identity vague, I did some legal work, a lot of legal work, for one of the companies that during the one of the industries that during the Obama administration couldn't get financing. The Obama administration bank regulators told banks and credit card processing companies not to do business with various industries. And no, it was not pornography. I know that's what you're thinking. No, that's not it.
Hoping.
And so I actually got involved in that, and I did some discovery and looked at emails, for example, between the banking regulators and the banks. And it was really chilling and disturbing. The bank regulators, federal officials, were saying, yeah, you're not going to do business with these people. I'm exaggerating and summarizing, but that's basically what it was. Well, guess what? There's some pretty big repercussions. We know, for example, I know that gun stores, I want to say, maybe Cheryl and Danny have some thoughts on this, but some gun stores couldn't get their credit card processing done. We are absolutely dependent, every business, on credit cards and bank overnight transfers and wires and all these things. I mean, we just are. And it was an extremely effective way to shut down some opponents and score some quick political points. And this is the thing, of course, I'm a prepper author and deal with a lot of prepper stuff. And a lot of folks on my Facebook page and elsewhere are always saying, oh, these, Antifa soy boys, they're a bunch of wusses and we can beat them up and stuff. And maybe that's true. What they don't get is some of the tools that the left has to really cripple us. And it doesn't involve a law. It doesn't involve any kind of court case. It's just a liberal, progressive, whatever administration, even hinting to the banks, who are, corporate weasels and are a bunch of libs themselves, right? I mean, there's no hardcore capitalists in banking anymore, trust me. And so it's extremely effective. And it doesn't have a lot of fingerprints, and we're going to see more and more of this. And this, to me, is kind of the opening shot on this. Now that we've kind of reshuffled the political deck and the Democrats are in charge of the House, we're seeing stories like this come up. So I'm very, very concerned. And here's the thing: we always see this, like, conservatives will say, "Well, we're going to have our own Kickstarter, our own GoFundMe, our own Patreon, or something like that." Those rarely take off. There's no way to have an alternative. You can't have the Bank of Freedom or something like that that's just going to take over because, for example, the credit card processing systems, they own them and they will exclude people they don't like. So this is a big doggone deal, and I think not a lot of people are going to pay attention to it, but they should.
Cheryl, Danny?
Okay, so I don't know if you've heard of Operation Chokehold.
Definitely.
Choke point. We were actually part of that. I mean, we have been denied loans.
We were affected by it. We weren't part of it.
Right. I have a almost as high as you can get credit rating. We have been banking with a bank called Chase, and we had been banking with them for several years. Went in there to get a loan. They said, you'll be approved in 24 hours. I got a call before I even got back to the store, 15-minute drive, said my loan was denied. So one of the managers there that was going to give me the loan called me and told me that it was because of the firearms. Now, it's truth. They chased us out. Okay, Chase Bank did that. Now we went to a local credit union, and I'll say the name, Desert Financial. They have been sweethearts to us. They know we do guns. They love us. They gave me a loan that I didn't even ask for. So they're really good people, and there are some good banks out there. But these credit card companies, it's almost impossible to get a good credit card company that doesn't either charge you extra fees or whatever. But now I'm getting that with my insurance company. They don't want to insure firearms anymore. So my insurance went up $2,000 this year for 12 months.
Yeah.
And so they're doing that. And Eric Holder was so much involved in that Operation Choke Point. It's very, they can squeeze us out.
Yeah.
Because what do we do if we can't do credit cards?
Yeah, it is a big deal. Then we go to cash only businesses like the marijuana businesses everywhere.
Oh, Chase told me right after I applied for that loan and they denied it, that if I made a deposit over $2,000, they were going to close my account. Ever. And I made a deposit over $2,000, they closed my account. I said, well, where else am I going to do with the money? I have to make deposits, right?
Yeah.
So they wanted us out, bottom line.
What a bunch of jerks.
Yeah.
Well, and we aren't just a local business. We do business all across the country.
Right.
And so, how do you do cash across the country? They can go to the bank, they can get a money order or whatever,
right.
Cashier's check. I mean, it just slows everything down. And for what reason, really? I mean, we are one of the most federally regulated businesses there is. So for us to end up on a list, part of this choke point, Operation Choke Point, because they called it risky businesses. What did they, Glenn, do you remember what it was called?
Yeah, it was like high risk industries or something like that, where there was a high risk of
Fraud.
Scams and fraud. And I don't see that with gun stores.
I mean, if I sell a gun to somebody in another state, it has to go to a dealer in their state.
Yeah,
it's trackable, but even there's no way that you could fraud a credit card if they got a sign for it at the other end, do a 4473. I mean, if I was a credit card company, that's the kind of business I would want because they're safe and trackable.
True.
Exactly. From point A to point B, the whole thing is traceable and trackable. It's just another way, and this article that had come out to talk about, do you know that credit card companies are sort of complicit with these mass murderers? It's just another way to affect the culture and to cause those of us that own guns and sell guns and are any way connected with the Second Amendment community to look like we're fringe, to look like there's something weird and shady about us.
Yeah. And I say this all the time on this show and other shows, that the other side, the side that hates our freedoms, they have gotten incredibly savvy over the last couple of years, more savvy than they've ever been in history, is my thought. And they are using these things to great effect to further their desires and their things. So, these are big concerns. And I'll say, I already brought it up, but in Colorado, when we approved recreational marijuana sales, there were huge tax numbers projected that was going to go to schools and education and things like that. And those projections have fallen way, way, way short. But I mean, clearly we all can connect points A, B, and C is that it's a cash business. They can't deposit their money into banks. So when it's a cash business, they're clearly, and good for them, not going to report all of their income because there's no way to track it or follow that. And so they're not doing it. So tax revenue is way down. Homelessness and petty crimes are way up. And I'd still vote for it, but it's just kind of the same thing. When you make everybody an outlaw, they do outlaw stuff. So Turncoat Marco Rubio introduces red flag bill. This is an interesting one. In the last presidential election at the very beginning, I kind of like what Rubio had to say. I gave money to his campaign on a monthly basis. And then I noticed that he wasn't showing up for his votes. And I said, well, if you can't do your job while you're running for president, then you probably shouldn't have that job. And kind of quit supporting him. I think that when he was on stage with Parkland kids, that something there affected him. He doesn't seem to be the same politician that he used to be. And now he's pretty proud about his ERPO, or his red flag gun confiscation. He's going to bring it in. He's super excited about it. And I don't know how you guys feel about that, but Glenn, what do you think?
I hate red flag laws. I understand the idea behind them, but I don't know of an actual way to make that great idea work. Much like communism, great idea, no one can figure out how to make it work. And I think you're right. I've noticed the same thing about Marco Rubio. He changed the Parkland thing when it happened. I halfway expected him to come out and say good stuff, and he was cowering and he was not saying good stuff. I think also that, and we won't get into like a giant nationwide political discussion or partisan thing, but Marco Rubio is part of the establishment Republicans, and he's got to be sitting around in the Senate thinking, well, it's not like I can do the stuff I want to do because Donald Trump is a president. So he's kind of like on the outs with the president. And so when people are on the outs, they often, and I've been a lobbyist, so I know this stuff, but they often do goofy pet projects because they kind of don't care anymore. And that's my interpretation of this. I think, by the way, these red flag laws, these confiscations, and they're just starting in various states, that's when police officers are going to get killed. And we're going to see a lot. The more red flag confiscations we see, the more police officers we're going to see being killed executing those things. And I don't want any of that to happen. But that could be one of the things that really gets, I don't know, tease this issue up, because right now it's policy papers and stuff like that, and words and paper. When a lot of police officers start dying, and it's very noticeable why they're dying because of these laws, things are going to get crazy. The libs are going to get more lefty, and we're going to get more angry. So I hate these laws, and I'm really disappointed in Marco Rubio. But I've worked in and around politics for a long time, and the more you know, the more you think they're all a bunch of scumbag lying. All the stuff people say, people don't know anything about politics. They're like, yeah, all politicians are scumbags. And you listen to them and you go, well, how would you know? Well, let me tell you, I've been in it, and they're right. So anyway, on that note,
we've always said anyone who wants to be a politician shouldn't be allowed to be a politician. It should be a matter of service, not that they just want that thing.
Exactly.
Cheryl, what do you think?
So the red flag laws are so insidious and so dangerous, and can be used for so many wrong things. So period, end of story, right? Take, for example, suppose you're in an abusive relationship, right? And you're trying to get away from your abuser. Well, if your abuser knows that you can protect yourself, all he's got to do is red flag you. Now you're going to be disarmed. You're going to be easier prey, right? Same thing can happen with the domestic, or what is that, order of protection that people put against each other. But the main thing that bugs me about the red flag laws is it's one of these feel goods. It's one of these well-meaning. Probably Marco Rubio, in his heart, he's thinking, well, if they'd had red flag laws, they could have stopped this kid from going in there and murdering the high school kids. So he probably has some well-meaning motives behind it. But if somebody is so dangerous, why are we only removing one tool that he could use to harm others? Why is it just about guns, right? I mean, people use all kinds of different things to harm one another, knives and pressure cookers, they make bombs out of them, and their cars and all that sort of thing. Why aren't they possibly taking the person, the human, into custody, which sounds, horrible too. It is horrible. Because why? Because there's been no due process. And we don't really even know if there is a danger to others or to self.
Well, we had a customer once that had over 90 guns, and he had a stepdaughter living with him, and she said he abused them. And so the Goodyear Police Department took all their guns away, and then he had to sell them. So we sold all the 90 guns for him. And about 6 months later, she confessed that it was just made up. So look what that did to him. I mean, he had guns on there that they were just beautiful guns, and he lost them all because somebody said, they didn't prove, somebody said that he had done wrong.
Really, that's just, yeah, it's terrible. And I applied the same thing that I applied to everything else. Would this have stopped any of the big events that we've heard about in the last few years? Nope. Doesn't look like any of that would have worked. You know, they knew that the Parkland guy was gonna hurt people. They knew it. They had all the opportunities to remove it. This wouldn't have stopped it. Is there any version of this law? And Glenn, you talked about this. There's no version of this that doesn't eliminate due process, and therefore I just don't think we can have it. I say this all the time. If you would sacrifice freedom for safety, you don't deserve either. And you know, I don't think that anyone has ever said it better. I think we're actually at our time limit, but before we go, I definitely want to give you guys the opportunity to talk about all the stuff that you guys do and where everyone can find you. Cheryl and Danny, I want to start with you guys. What's all the stuff you're interested in, and how can people find you?
Well, we wear several hats. We own 3 businesses. One is the gun shop. I'll let Dan talk about that.
We have AZ Firearms. We're a local shop in Avondale, Arizona. We have about 1,300 guns, and we specialize in collectible guns. We also want to help people that are new in the field and help them get guns the right way. We advocate education, that kind of thing.
We have a full-time gunsmith and that sort of thing. We also have an auction house, Pot of Gold Estate Auctions, where we auction off guns, coins, jewelry, antiques, collectibles, cars, boats, all the fun higher-end stuff that you might find in a person's home when it's time to downsize, that kind of thing. And then, of course, our radio show, Gun Freedom Radio, that we co-host. So Dan gets to say hello, and
you're allowing me to talk right now.
Goodbye.
Yeah. That's why I probably talk so much this time, because she doesn't have the rope to tie me up with right now.
She didn't put the collar on.
Camera. I have to play nice.
One of the fun things that we do on our show, we have a responsibly armed citizen report that we do, and we talk about people that actually saved someone's life or saved a victim from a problem. So it's good to have those.
Absolutely. It's a 2-hour weekly show. It's an interview-based show just like this. So we reach out to experts in their field, and we get a chance to kind of pick their brain, because I know what I'm thinking. I want to know what they're thinking. But it's been a really tremendous opportunity to get to know some incredible people. And when anyone tries to paint the firearms community, really whatever that is, as something shady or seedy, I'm like, all right, just go to my guest tab on my webpage, gunfreedomradio.com, and just peruse it. The best people you'd ever want to know in your life.
So awesome. So gunfreedomradio.com, you just said, and where can we find the other 2 things online?
azfirearms.com for the gun shop, and potofgoldestate.com for the auction house.
And all the social media, there's all that out there as well?
All of that, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, probably others. We have a team, because that is a full-time job right there, just doing social media.
So awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Totally appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Glenn Tate, what do you do? Where can people find you?
Yes, sir. I wrote a 10-book prepper novel series called 299 Days, and it's at 299days.com. It surprisingly successful. I just sat down and started writing stuff. I know nobody believes me, but I just sat down and I just had these ideas. I'd never written fiction before. I didn't know how to write fiction. And I have all these amazingly cool friends that I've met that I don't even know why they're my friends. And it's just a story of the connection of all of us, and a collapse, a partial collapse. By the way, nothing weird, nothing racial, nothing kooky, no conspiracy theories. And it has been enormously successful, about 200,000 copies. And that's pretty crazy. And so that's my main gig. I have a day job, as I mentioned, as an attorney, and I do that. And then my wife, and I like Cheryl and Danny's, the couple vibe is always so cool, because we need more of that. And so my wife, Shelby Gallagher, who's sitting here right here with me today, by the way, she just went on a run, came back. She is a prepper author and has a 3-book series called The Great State. And it's prepping, and it's a female perspective, but not like a Jennifer Aniston cry kind of movie kind of female perspective. It's like the legitimate real woman perspective of being tough and needing guns in a prepping scenario. We have a show called Prepping 2.0. It's both a podcast, and it's on all the usual outlets, and it's also a radio show. We're on a couple stations now. We just got signed up in Salem, Oregon yesterday, as a matter of fact. And the radio part of this keeps growing. And it's a show about the next level of prepping. We talk about prepping 1.0 is having some beans and bullets, and you got that AR-15, and that's great. And we're not being sarcastic. That is great. The next level, you know, get some radios and work with your neighbors and get water stuff. So it's that next step. And then I have a project that'll be coming along this year called PAM, P-A-M radio, not ham radio. And it's practical amateur radio. It's all the stuff preppers need to know, but no equations and no trying to talk to Greenland when the ionosphere has some correct conditions, or, you know, that kind of stuff. It's not the hobby part. It's the practical part. And that keeps us really, really busy. Shelby and I tomorrow will be doing a book signing in Beaverton, Oregon, which is going to be fun. And because that's where a lot of her stuff comes from. She came out of Portland. So it's a great time to be alive right now. We have some battles to fight. We have some liberty to go get back. And I'm just really, really glad this network that we have, and I mean network in a small sense, you know, Firearms Radio Network and all these podcasts and the YouTube channels, and we're getting the word out. We're doing a magnificent job of getting our message out, especially to our people. And when times get really bad and people realize that a lot of stuff that they counted on doesn't work anymore, they're going to come to us because we're the ones that have stuff figured out. We're the ones that are going to have the electricity going. We're the ones that are going to be able to take care of ourselves, defend ourselves. That's a huge part of prepping. I mean, it's not about beekeeping and, you know, growing turnips and stuff like that. That's all great. Somebody's going to come to your house, steal your turnips, steal your bees, which I guess is dumb because they'll sting you. Yeah. And then you have to fight back. So that's why I'm a huge fan of the Second Amendment. I've needed it in the past, and Shelby, my wife, has needed it in the past, and so it's a personal thing. So that's what we do. It's where we can be reached, and we are so thrilled to be on your show. Or I'm thrilled to be on your. I'm looking at Shelby, so I'm saying we right now. So
I know she's there in spirit and presence as well. I own all 10 of your books. I've read the first 2. I need to get busy and read the rest. But thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate all of our guests tonight. You guys have been wonderful, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye now. So
this show, This Week in Guns, produced by Kenny Ortega, and is a production of the Firearms Radio Network. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, dialing in, downloading, whatever it is. We'll see you next week.
Shelby's here, by the way. I'm waving. You can't see me.
I can see you in spirit.
Okay.